Good afternoon. I'm very glad to be here talking to you. I was delighted when I heard that you were holding this symposium on December 5th, the 20th anniversary of the death of Nathan Huggins, in order to honor his life and his work. And it's wonderful to have this opportunity to share with you why he has been my favorite historian over these years, during which I've been an activist in the black community, and particularly in Detroit. I think that Huggins is so important because instead of talking about blacks as victims, he writes about them as a people who have the power within them to reinvent themselves and create the world anew. That's how he writes about the thousands, tens of thousands, and hundreds of thousands of Africans who were brought here in chains. They could create themselves anew. And that's how he wrote about Frederick Bailey, the slave who ran away from his slave masters and reinvented himself as Frederick Douglass, as a citizen who challenged Abraham Lincoln to wage the Civil War, not as a war to save the Union, but to abolish slavery, and thereby to redeem his own soul and the soul of this nation. Huggins had a way of recognizing the extraordinary individuals who emerge from the black community. For example, in his remarks to the symposium, which was convened in 1986 to discuss how to celebrate the recently established Martin Luther King holiday, he singled out Martin Luther King and Malcolm X as individuals who have such a deep sense of themselves and of their purpose that they throw a lens on a larger reality. And I think that at this extraordinary moment, we need to think of both King and Malcolm as two individuals who show a lens on a larger reality. Both the war in the Middle East, in which we are mired, and the war at home in our inner cities. Martin Luther King said in his anti-Vietnam War speech that we needed a radical revolution of values, not only against racism, but against materialism and militarism. And he said that a nation that continues to spend more on its weapons than on social uplift is experiencing spiritual death. That's the juncture at which we are. And Malcolm, who had such a sense of himself and his purpose, that in his 20s, he transformed himself from a convict and a hustler into a leader, and kept transforming himself until he was killed in 1965, only a few months before his 40th birthday. I think that what we see today, when Malcolm was alive, there are only a few ex-cons. But today we have millions of them in the black community. And some of them are beginning to emerge, honoring Malcolm and carrying on a day-to-day struggle in order to bring the neighbor back into the hood, to create peace zones out of the war zones that our neighborhoods had become. As graduate students, I imagine that most of you are thinking of professional careers in the academy. But I would urge you to bear in mind that over the last 40 years, when black professionals have had the opportunity to consider the academy their turf, we've had practically a cultural holocaust in the black community. Both the black intellectuals and the black community have suffered from the divorce which we've experienced. So I hope that your generation, as you prepare for your future, will think about how you can become part of the struggle in the communities and not only part of the academy. That responsibility and that opportunity is one that your generation can undertake and fulfill. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Evelyn Higginbotham. I'm a professor here at Harvard's African American Studies, and I'm also chair of the department. Can you hear me?
Yes, and I'm awfully glad to meet you, if only in this way.
Yes, your protege, Scott Kuroshiga, is he there?
Yes, he's here. He's here. He talks about you a lot.
Yeah, I was Scott's undergraduate teacher, so I am very happy to know he's there. But the other thing I wanted to say to you was that in our Department of African and African American Studies, we do have now a special initiative called social engagement, and our students combine their intellectual work with work in the community.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. What I would like to say is that over the last couple of decades, during which so many changes have taken place in the inner cities, and especially the emergence of black mayors, there has been a detachment of black intellectuals from city struggles. And I think that if you do not get engaged in the city struggle, it's not just a question of studying the city. It's not just a question of getting statistics on poverty and unemployment. It's not just a sociological question. It's a highly political question. And that's what engagement means. It means engaging in struggle. And that's why I think I really appreciated Huggins, because I think he had that sense of struggle.
Hello, I'm Werner Saulers. We emailed a little bit before this event. One of the things that Huggins always believed in was that a myth of a mixed race origin or some kind of black-white coupling is important as a national foundation and can also create a utopian possibility. And in some of the responses to Obama's election, it was as if he was seen as a kind of messianic figure because he embodies a black and white aspect right in himself. So I just wondered, for you as a seasoned radical, what do you think are the particular challenges that the Obama years face, that we face in the Obama years with a new form of radicalism at a moment where the messianic glow is still fairly strong?
Well, I'm very glad to talk with you, and I was glad to receive your email. There's an article in today's New York Times by Charlie Blow in which he talks about this being the worst of times and the best of times. And he refers to how things have gotten worse for black people since Obama was elected, rather than better. And I think that's one of the paradoxes we have to face. As more blacks get access to the privileges and power of whites, things worsen for the blacks that are at the bottom. That's a huge challenge. And I don't think you can just, I think it's important that Nathan Huggins was biracial. I think that what we're entering into is a century when there are going to be many more biracial people. And I think that this gave him an insight into both cultures. But I think that the difference between him and Obama was that Obama was raised by his grandmother, and his insights are more into white culture than they are into black culture.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us. And do you have any final comments before we bid you adieu?
Well, I want to remind you of something that we used to refer to and quote a great deal during the 60s. It was the statement by Frantz Fanon that each generation coming out of obscurity must define its mission and then fulfill or betray it. I'd like to urge you as young people, you're about 1/4 my age, to think about that and to think about the 21st century in those terms. Thank you. I'm very glad to have been here.